Every time I create a new project, I just start from the exact same base because it has Next.js, TypeScript, Jest, Redux, ESLint, Prettier, all these things just pre-configured from the get-go, so I don't have to write the same thing over and over again every time I want to start a new product. So I'm going to show you how to build the best production-ready template to just spin up apps in no time. So let's go. So to get started, we are going to run npx create-next-app at latest to create the initial Next.js app. Click yes, and my project will be named Next.js template. Yes to TypeScript, yes to ESLint, Tailwind, src directory, app router, yes. The import alias, I will say yes, and I'll explain what this means later. Let everything run, and I'll come back once it's done. So if you face the same error that I got, it says that I don't have access, basically admin access to run this command. And it even tells me what to run. This sudo ch own thing basically gives me super admin access to this folder here, which is my npm folder. So I'm just going to run that, and I will try run the whole thing again. And we can see this time that it worked. Success, created the folder. And if I look in, I have my public folder, my src source folder, and all the starter files. I do want this to be on the top level, so I'm just going to take all of this and pull it up here, if it lets me, and delete the Next.js template folder. So I'm just going to git commit this as the initial commit. So the first thing I'm going to set up is a thing called Husky. This is a package for JavaScript that basically runs a command before you do something else. An example is before I commit to GitHub, it'll run all my tests, it'll run a lint, so I'm not committing bad code. Or before I push, it can run a build command to actually build the app, make sure I'm pushing something that can actually be built. So when my website is deployed, there's not going to be any like type errors or something that prevents it being built. So if we go over to the getting started page, we can just run this npx husky init and npm install. So I'm going to do that. And once that's done, you can check in the package.json, there's a new script called prepare, and this runs before you run npm install. If I show you, I'll run npm I, you can see Husky git hooks installed. So every time a new user comes to your app or you re-pull the app from GitHub, you run install, it'll install all these hooks. And it's come with a template one, which runs npm test. We don't have any tests set up yet, so I'm just going to change that to npm lint. And what this does is, since this is a pre-commit hook, every time I try to commit something now, if I do something, you'll see that I'm getting an error, npm unknown command lint, because here I need to run npm run lint rather than that. So if I try run git commit again, you can see that the lint function is running, and there's actually an error, which is good, so it doesn't get committed, and I can't push this error code to GitHub. I'm not entirely sure what's causing this error since I just made a new project, so I'm going to try and delete node modules and reinstall everything. I think something didn't link properly. And let's try run the lint function again. And this time there's no errors. So I think something didn't install properly in node modules. I'm not entirely sure. But now when I try to, let's run the git commit again, and I'm going to say feat add husky package. You can see it runs the lint. There's no errors and everything gets committed properly. So now I can push this and there'll be no problem. So the next thing we're going to look at is Commitlint. And you might have noticed my commit message just now said feat semicolon and then the commit message. This is a convention that's been around for a while, and Commitlint basically enforces that convention. So when you look through your commit history, you can see like feat, for, build, fix, test, all these different sections of commits, rather than just a whole mess of messages that are somewhat meaningless. This just makes things a bit cleaner on your Git side. I don't know any reason why you shouldn't be using this convention, so I always set it up, and it's just put me in good habits. So the common types are build, chore, CI, docs, feed, fix, perf, refactor, revert, style, and test. You don't have to worry about that. I'm going to leave a note in our template actually that shows you what you need to use. So we need two packages. We need config conventional and CLI from the Commitlint package. So let's install both of those. And while that's installing, you can see they say to lint commits before they are created. You can use Husky's commit message hook, which is what we are going to use. So we've already done this step here. And now we just have to run this command to add the hook. So this basically runs Commitlint before you push a commit message. So back in the code, we just paste that in here. You can see we have a new Husky script called commit message. It says npx, whatever that means. If I try now to add a new commit, which doesn't follow the standard procedure, it should fail. And here we have the error. So our input was lol. It says please add rules, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so our error is we actually didn't put any rules. So let's add that file now. So we have to create a file called commitlint.config.js. And I'm just going to paste this in because there's no reason to ever write this out. It extends the config conventional package that we just installed. And there's a whole bunch of rules in here. You can go through them on your own time. But here is where the magic is. So these are the different types that are the conventions. There's builds, there's CI, there's docs. And rather than memorizing what these are, I always leave them in the Commitlint config file, just so before I commit something, I'll come back and have a read and be like, okay, this is probably a fix, this is probably a performance change, stuff like that. So here I'm about to push a message. So let's say git add everything. And now if I try to just put lol, it should throw another error. And here it says subject may not be empty, type may not be empty. And these are here. Subject empty. 2 basically means error. And what's the other one? Type may not be empty. So here, type 2. This is also an error. And these are the types that are allowed, which are the ones that I have up here. So if we actually do a proper message, so let's say this is a CI change because it's to do with the deployments. So CI install Commitlint. Now that we've done it in the correct convention, there's no errors and everything gets committed properly. Now that that's finally done, we're going to lock the engines, which basically means everyone has to use a certain value of node, npm, yarn, pn, whatever you're using within your app. This just prevents stupid errors where someone's using a different version of node and something's missing. So you can be as strict as you want with it. I'm going to create an object. And my node version, I think I'm on 16 right now. So I will say this has to be greater than 16. You can set this to whatever you want. It could be 18. It could even be a specific value like that, where they have to use 16.16.0, which is what I'm on. Otherwise it throws an error. And also npm, yarn, and finally pnpm. But since you're only going to want to use one of these 3, you should just change the others to, for example, please use yarn. And here as well, please use yarn. And I'm going to start using yarn instead of npm. I've recently been using pnpm, but it's been giving me a little bit of trouble, so I'm just going to stick with yarn for this video. And we also have to write here engine strict equals true. If I run yarn, there should be no issues at all. But if I run pnpmi and try to install it with pnpn instead of yarn, it should throw me an error. So here, pnpmi, it says expected version, please use yarn. If you have any issues with this, you could just create a .npm-rc file and set engine-strict true equal true. So now if I try to run npmi as well, it should say please use yarn somewhere. So not compatible with your version, which is great. So the next thing I'm going to set up is Prettier, which basically formats your code. It might already be installed, but no, it's not. So I will run yarn add Prettier as a dev dependency. And I was messing around with the versions earlier, so I need to set that back to 16. And once this is added, we can add our settings as well for Prettier. So I'm going to add it straight into the package.json. You can add a .prettier.rc file as well if you prefer, like this. But I don't like to crowd up the root level, so I'm just going to dump it here. So Prettier, and these are all my settings. And I'm also going to create a script called format. So this is just going to run Prettier -- write all. So this will run Prettier for all files. Now if I run that, yarn format, you can see it goes through all my files and formats it. Here's all the changes because it's just formatting changes. And now even in my pre-commit, I'm going to run here. Ooh, let's change these to yarn actually. So yarn format, and this is npx, so this is fine. Now whenever I commit something, so git add, and go back to the Commitlint and see what this should be. I'm just going to put this under build because when I build, this is going to format. So add Prettier and Husky. Now you see it's running Prettier, and then it's running lint, and then it actually commits. If you had no idea what Prettier was, it basically just formats code for you. So let's say I added a whole bunch of white space for some reason, it will remove it. I can just add a whole bunch of spacing for no reason, and whenever I press save, it formats my code cleanly. I'm pretty sure every developer within JavaScript or TypeScript uses this, so I would definitely use it. Next, I'm going to add a .vs code folder. So up here, and the first thing I'm going to add is the settings.json, and I'm going to paste in my previously made settings. So this editor.ruler adds a ruler here at space 100, because in my Prettier rules I have print width set to 100. You can set this to whatever, so if yours is 130 here, in here just put 130. It's just, I like to see a visual representation of where the end of the line is, so I know when it's going to spill over. The default formatter, I've set it to Prettier, and on save it organizes the imports, and fix all is basically running Prettier. I can mess up my imports and press save, and it puts it in the right order again. This ensures that when there's loads of people working on a team, if someone decides to put this down here for some reason, it'll always be in the same order. So you don't crowd your GitHub change history with like people just moving around imports for some reason. It's good to be as consistent as you can, so which is why I put these rules here. Another good one to have is a .extensions, sorry, not dot, just extensions.json, and you can put in recommendations. So this is the ESLint package, and this is the Prettier package. So if you're someone who doesn't have these two installed, there'll be a little recommended thing here saying get ESLint, get Prettier. So all new devs that come onto your team will see it under here, and they can easily install it. Next, we're going to set up tests with Jest. So from the docs on Next.js 13, there's a jest.config.js file. So we're just going to copy that in, jest.config.js, and this is what they've given us. There are a couple of things we need to add. Firstly, because we use type aliases, we have to have this module name mapper. So if you look in the tsconfig, it's basically this thing here. These paths @/* resolves to source /*. So within the Jest config, we have this @/* resolves to root directory /* source. So it's written slightly differently, and every time you want to add something into the paths here, make sure you add it here as well, just in this slightly different format. The other thing is this test environment, because we are using JS DOM. It's just to prevent some errors coming later on. And finally, we have this jest.setup.js file as well, which just imports the testing library, which we need to install now. And I'm going to install a huge wall of dependencies. So Jest and just a whole bunch of types and testing library packages. And just make sure to install them as dev dependencies, not dependencies. So I'm just going to rerun that. And then I need to create a test script. So let's just call Jest. Watch all basically means watch for changes, and verbose just gives more descriptions on why things are failing. So we'll have to actually create a test. So I'm going to create a simple component, and I'm just going to create a simple button with all these stylings and whatnot. You can just copy the code or have a look at it. So since I have here BG primary, and I have text primary, border primary, whatnot, my tailwind has to configure for this primary color. So now that I have the component built, let's build a test. So here I've created a test folder and a test called button.test.tsx. Just make sure this is .tsx rather than ts, so we can use the DOM stuff. And in here I've created a test which is on the top level, it's called button, and within it I have two tests. One of them tests that it renders. So you can see that this expects the button to be in the document, and the other one tests the onClick. So I create a Jest function, a mock function, tie it to the button, and use this fire event. Now when I run yarn test, it should run all the tests. So here we have button and the two tests, renders and fires event onClick. So if I purposely break the test, so let's say this shouldn't be in the document, but when I click save, because of using this watch all, every time I save anywhere in the code, it'll rerun the test. So now that I've broken the test, you can see that one has failed, and because I gave it the So here I've created a test folder and a test called button.test.tsx. Just make sure this is .tsx rather than ts, so we can use the DOM stuff. And in here I've created a test which is on the top level, it's called button, and within it I have two tests. One of them tests that it renders. So you can see that this expects the button to be in the document, and the other one tests the onClick. So I create a Jest function, a mock function, tie it to the button, and use this fire event. Now when I run yarn test, it should run all the tests. So here we have button and the two tests, renders and fires event onClick. So if I purposely break the test, so let's say this shouldn't be in the document, but when I click save, because of using this watch all, every time I save anywhere in the code, it'll rerun the test. So now that I've broken the test, you can see that one has failed, and because I gave it the verbose flag, you can see all this stuff about it. It says expected the document not to contain the element, but it found it. You can see where the error is, and we can just fix it. Save, and all is good. So the final thing I'm going to set up is React Redux Toolkit. So I'm going to add Redux Toolkit, and I'm going to add a folder called Redux, which then has a store.ts file and a slices folder. So I'm going to create a counter slice.ts, and inside the store we add all of this. So what we have here is all of our reducers, so these are all our slices. Currently we only have the counter, and this function just sets it up with the preloaded state, and all of these are perfectly typed, so it works perfectly with TypeScript. The thing you'll use the most is this root state, which I'll show you how to access later on, and this is the actual store. So within the counter slice, I've created a very simple counter redux state. So here we have a counter which has three methods. One of them is the set count, one of them is increment count, which just increases the count by 1, and one of them clears it, so sets it back to 0. And I export all of these as counter slice actions and export the whole reducer for the store to import. And I also have this counter state, which is stored in types redux, and it's just the entire state, so all of this initial state. So within the page.tsx inside our app folder, I'm going to use const count equals use selector, and this will take the root state, and this I have to import from Redux, which it's not, and I have to remember to add this package as well, and then I can happily import this. So in the count I will put here, And to make sure everything works, I have to wrap everything inside the layout with a provider. So this is imported from React Redux. I pass in the store as well that comes from the file that we created earlier. So this one here, export const store. We are now putting that in here. And finally close that off. And everything should be working. I just need to make this button actually do something. So we also need to import dispatch. Use dispatch. And in here we can say dispatch increment count. So now when I run the server, I get hit with an error because I'm using client-side logic within a server component. So now we have to extract everything into a client wrapper, which I'll do. So I'll just create a simple client wrapper inside a layouts folder and take all of this logic and import everything. You don't need this font thing that they've put in, so I'm just going to remove this and add the type for the children. And in our layout, finally, we use the client wrapper and put the children in. Also, I have to make sure to tell Next.js that this is a client-side component, so I type use client. And if I refresh everything, we finally see the page with that button component that we added a test for earlier. Now when I click it, you can see the count is incremented and this is read from the Redux store. Obviously this very simple component should just be made with regular state, but this is a template that I wanted to set up Redux for. If I refresh, you can see it goes back to 0 and everything's working. Alright, that's been a long video. Hopefully this was helpful. I set up so many things that I'm going to use in all my projects like Redux, Commitlint, tests, all this good stuff. And hopefully you will too. If you have any questions about why I did anything or why I skimmed through something really quickly, just let me know in the comments below. And I'll see you in the next one.